What you are about to watch is based on real events. These are people who woke up one morning, opened the same apps you're using right now, and by the end of the day, someone was dead. Some of these cases will shock you. Some of them will make you angry. And some of them will make you look at your phone a little differently after today. Welcome to Primetime Crime. Warning, viewer discretion is advised. Hayley Jones killed because she changed her Facebook status. Hayley Jones was 26 years old, a mother of 4, and had finally made up her mind that she was leaving the man she had been with since she was a little girl. She had spent more than a decade of her life with Brian Lewis, through all the good and the bad and everything in between, and she had reached the point that a lot of people in difficult relationships eventually reach, the point where you just know that you are done and that staying any longer is going to cost you more than you are willing to pay. So she did what people do when they are ready to move on. She sat down, she opened her Facebook profile, and she changed her relationship status from married to single. A few clicks, a few seconds, and then she went on with her day, not knowing that Brian Lewis had seen it, and not knowing what he had already decided to do about it. Hayley grew up in New Tredegar, a small quiet town in South Wales, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and news travels fast. She had met Brian Lewis when she was just 13 years old and he was 18. They met at a fun fair, and from that moment on, her life became tied to his in a way that never really gave her the chance to figure out who she was outside of that relationship. They were never officially married, but their Facebook status said married. They had 4 children together, and to the outside world it looked like a family that was holding together, but behind closed doors, it was a different story. When Lewis lost his job, the pressure inside that house grew. Hayley went to work as a care assistant to keep the family afloat, spending her days looking after other people, which tells you a great deal about the kind of woman she was. She was someone who showed up, someone who carried the weight without complaining about it. But as she spent more time outside the house and more time on Facebook, Lewis became consumed by jealousy. He was convinced she was using Facebook to talk to other men, that the platform was giving her a way out of the life they had built together, and the thought of that drove him to a dark and dangerous place. He monitored her online activity constantly, questioned her about her messages, her friends, where she had been and who she had spoken to. He made the house feel smaller and smaller until Hayley finally made her decision. On March 2nd, 2009, she changed her Facebook status from married to single and made clear to everyone in her life that the relationship was over. For Hayley, it was an act of freedom, a first step toward a life that belonged to her. For Brian Lewis, it was something else entirely. It was a public humiliation, a statement that she had chosen to broadcast to everyone they knew, everyone in that small town where everyone already knew their business, that she was walking away from him. And he was not going to let that go. 4 days after Hayley changed her status, Lewis was drinking at the Phillipstown Social Club when he told the people around him exactly what he was thinking. He said, out loud, in front of witnesses, that if he could not have her, then nobody else would, because he would kill her first. The people who heard him apparently did not take it seriously enough to act on it. Maybe they thought it was the drink talking. Maybe they thought it was just an angry man saying angry things that angry men sometimes say. Whatever the reason, nobody warned Hayley. Nobody called the police. And Brian Lewis went home carrying everything he had just said out loud in that pub. On March 12, 2009, 10 days after Hayley changed her Facebook status, Lewis attacked her at 4 o'clock in the morning while she was asleep on the sofa. He stabbed her with a kitchen knife, and then he strangled her. Their 5-year-old son was in the house and witnessed the attack, something that no child should ever have to carry for the rest of their life. After he killed her, Lewis drove himself to a police station and called 999. When the operator answered, he said 4 words: I strangled her. Just like that. No panic, no remorse in his voice, just a statement of fact. He then fled the scene and left the children to find their mother's body. Hayley's 4 children lost everything that morning. Her mother, Sally Williams, stepped in and raised all 4 of them after Hayley was gone, because that is what families do when the worst happens, and there is no other choice. Brian Lewis was convicted of murder at Cardiff Crown Court in September 2009 and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 14 years. The judge had no trouble reaching a verdict. The witnesses from the pub had already told the court what Lewis said 4 days before he killed her. He had announced what he was going to do, and then he went and did it. What makes this case so hard to sit with is how preventable it was. There were warning signs everywhere. The jealousy, the paranoia, the way he monitored her online activity, and then the moment in that pub where he said plainly and clearly that he would kill her if he could not have her. Someone heard that and did nothing. Hayley never got the warning she deserved. She never got the chance to take her children somewhere safe. She just went to sleep on her sofa that night thinking she had already done the hardest part, which was leaving. She had no idea that for Brian Lewis, her leaving was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far worse. Hayley Jones was 26 years old. She just wanted her life back. She never got it. Kathleen Ber and the Facebook love triangle. In 2016, in the city of Scranton, Pennsylvania, an 18-year-old young mother named Kayla Van Wert was killed over a Facebook argument about a boy. The girl who killed her was 16 years old, and the argument that led to her death had been playing out online, in front of everyone they knew, for weeks before anyone ended up dead. This is a case that is hard to talk about because of how young everyone involved was, and it is a case that is impossible to ignore because of what it tells us about what social media is doing to young people who are not yet equipped to handle the kind of pressure it creates. Kathleen Ber was 16 years old and had feelings for a boy whose life was already complicated. The boy she was interested in had a history with Kayla Van Wert, and not just a romantic one. Kayla was the mother of his child, which meant she was always going to be present in his life in a way that could not simply be wished away or competed out of existence. That is a difficult thing to accept at any age. But at 16, when everything feels urgent and personal and your entire social world revolves around the people you go to school with and follow online, it can feel unbearable. And instead of finding a way to process those feelings and accept a situation she could not change, Kathleen took everything she was feeling straight to Facebook. The arguments between Kathleen and Kayla started the way most social media arguments start, with a comment, a reply, and a back and forth that starts small and grows bigger with every exchange. What began as a conflict between 2 girls over a boy slowly turned into something uglier and more personal as the days went on. Comments became accusations, and accusations became threats. The language got nastier, the posts got more aggressive, and the whole thing kept building because that is what happens when an argument plays out in public on social media. Neither person can afford to back down because backing down in front of an audience feels like admitting defeat, and admitting defeat online, with everyone you know watching and reacting, can feel like one of the worst things that can happen to you when you are a teenager and your social world is everything. People in their circle were watching it unfold. Mutual friends were following along, reacting, picking sides, adding energy to something that really needed someone to step in and shut it down before it went any further. But nobody did. The platform kept serving the posts to whoever wanted to see them, and both girls kept going, kept pushing things further than they had been the day before, until the argument had reached a place that neither of them could probably have imagined it reaching when it first started. Kayla Van Wert was 18 years old. She was a young mother who was doing what young mothers do, trying to raise a child and figure out her life at the same time, carrying responsibilities that most people her age did not have yet. She had a whole future ahead of her, full of difficulty and potential in equal measure, the kind of future that is hard, but that is also full of possibility if you get the chance to live it. She did not get that chance, because Kathleen Ber made a decision that no 16-year-old should ever be in a position to make, and no 16-year-old should ever follow through on, which is the decision that the only way to end a Facebook argument was to end the person she was having it with. Kathleen killed Kayla Van Wert. A teenage girl decided that a social media feud over a boy had gone on long enough, and that murder was the answer to it. Kayla's child lost their mother, a family lost someone they loved, and all of it traces back to an argument that started in a comment section on Facebook and was never interrupted before it reached the point of no return. Kathleen was charged and convicted. Because of her age, she was processed through the juvenile justice system, which meant that the consequences she faced, as serious as they were, looked very different from what an adult convicted of the same crime would have faced. Some people feel strongly that that is the right way to handle cases involving juvenile offenders, and there are people who feel equally strongly that it is not. But whatever your position on that question, the one thing that nobody disagrees on is that no legal outcome, no sentence, and no verdict changes anything for Kayla Van Wert and her child. The law can hold people accountable, but it cannot give back what was taken. This case is also an important conversation about what we are doing to young people by handing them social media platforms with no real guardians and no real guidance for what happens when things go wrong. Teenagers have always had rivalries, jealousies, and conflicts over boys and girls. That is not new. What is new is the environment those conflicts now play out in. A public, always on, always visible environment where every insult lands in front of an audience, and every argument becomes a performance that an entire social circle can watch and weigh in on. For adults, that kind of pressure is already a lot to manage. For teenagers who are still developing the emotional capacity to regulate what they feel and make sound decisions under pressure, it can be genuinely overwhelming in ways that we do not talk about honestly or loudly enough. None of that excuses what Kathleen Ber did. Nothing excuses it and nothing makes it acceptable. But it does explain something about the world that produced it. A world where a teenage rivalry over a boy became a weeks-long public performance in a Facebook comment section, constantly fed by an audience of peers, constantly escalating because neither girl could find a way to step back without feeling like she had lost. Kayla Van Wert deserved the chance to raise her child. She deserved the chance to grow up and figure out who she was going to be. A Facebook argument took all of that away from her, and the boy that both of them were fighting over walked away without facing any of the consequences at all. He got to keep going. Kayla did not, and that is the part of this story that is the hardest to sit with. Tory Lynn Emory's road rage rampage. There are moments in these cases where you find yourself thinking, how did it even get to this? How did something that started with someone typing angry words into a phone end up here, in this place, with these consequences? How does a Facebook argument become something that puts innocent people in the ground? And then you hear this next case, and that question becomes louder than ever. Because this is a story that starts with a Facebook feud over a man and ends with a high-speed car chase through city streets, an innocent woman dead at an intersection, and a 3-year-old child sitting in the back seat of the car being driven by the person who caused all of it. A 3-year-old in the back seat through the whole thing. And if that detail does not make you stop and put your phone down for a second, then nothing will. Tory Lynn Emory was 23 years old, while Danielle Booth was 20 years old, and the two of them had never been friends. What they had in common was a man, someone they were both connected to romantically, And that shared history had curdled over time into a Facebook feud that had been running for months by the time everything fell apart. Months of posts and comments and messages, and all of the slow, grinding, very public digital warfare that plays out between people who are furious at each other and have a platform that lets them perform that fury in front of everyone they know. Both of them going back and forth, saying things that got nastier with every exchange, with an audience of mutual friends and followers watching and reacting and adding energy to something that was already burning hot enough on its own. For months, it stayed on the screen. As ugly as it was, as personal as it had gotten, it was still just posts. Still just the kind of thing that you could, in theory, walk away from at any point by simply putting your phone down and deciding you were done. The feud lived in their phones and nowhere else, which meant that as bad as it had gotten, nobody had been physically hurt. Nobody had been put in danger. It was a Facebook argument between two young women who hated each other, and there are thousands of those happening every single day without anyone ending up dead. Then, one afternoon, Tory was driving through town and she saw Danielle in another car. And something that had been living on his screen for months suddenly became real, physical, and immediate in a way that Tory apparently could not handle. All of those months of back-and-forth posts, all of that built-up anger that had been sitting in her chest every time she picked up her phone and saw something Danielle had said, all of it came rushing forward the moment she spotted that car. And instead of driving past, taking a breath and letting it go, instead of recognizing that whatever happened on Facebook could stay on Facebook and did not need to follow either of them into the street, Tory Lynn Emory pressed her foot down on the accelerator and went after her. What followed was a chase that covered ground across the city of Pontiac, Michigan, with Tory repeatedly ramming her car into Danielle's vehicle, hitting it again and again, using a car as a weapon against a person she had been fighting with online. Danielle was terrified. She was desperate to get away from someone who was clearly not going to stop. The person behind the wheel of Danielle's car was a young woman named Alicia Abernathy, who had nothing at all to do with the feud between Tory and Danielle. She was not part of any of the Facebook posts. She had not been involved in any of the arguments. She was just the person who happened to be driving the car that Danielle was in, and she was doing everything she possibly could to get both of them away from a woman who was using her vehicle to try and run them off the road. In the middle of trying to escape, Alicia ran a red light. A truck hit them at full speed. Alicia Abernathy was killed on impact. She died right there at that intersection instantly, all because she was in the wrong car on the wrong day when a Facebook feud decided it was done being a Facebook feud and became something else entirely. She was not Tory's target. She was not part of the story that had led to this moment. She was a bystander who got pulled into someone else's rage and paid for it with her life, which is the kind of thing that is almost impossible to accept no matter how many times you turn it over in your head. And then there is the detail that takes this case somewhere most people are not prepared to go. Throughout the entire chase, through every single ram and every screech of tires and every moment of that violent, reckless pursuit through the streets of Pontiac, Tory Lynn Emory's 3-year-old child was sitting in the back seat of her car. She had put her toddler in that car and then used that car as a weapon, and her child was there for all of it, strapped into a seat while their mother drove into another vehicle over and over again because of an argument that had started on Facebook. There is no way to explain that decision. There is no framing of it that makes it anything other than what it is, which is a person so consumed by the need to win an online argument that they stopped being able to think about anything or anyone else, including the small child sitting right behind them. Tory was convicted and sentenced for her role in Alicia's death. Danielle Booth survived. But Alicia Abernathy's family lost someone who had nothing to do with any of it, someone who was simply in the wrong place because of someone else's feud, someone who never got the chance to go home that day because two women could not let go of a Facebook argument about a man. Alicia was not tagged in any of the posts. She did not leave any of the comments. She did not know either of these women well enough to be part of whatever had been building between them for months. She was just there, and in this case, just being there was enough to get her killed. That is what collateral damage looks like when a social media feud finally leaves the screen. It does not just hurt the people involved. It reaches whoever happens to be standing nearby. And Alicia Abernathy never had a single second to get out of the way. Endia Martin, the Facebook fight over a boy that killed a 14-year-old. Chicago, Illinois, April 28, 2014. Endia Martin was 14 years old. She was a freshman in high school and was doing well. She was an honors student who had big dreams. She talked about wanting to travel to Paris and Rome one day. She was thinking about joining the Navy or going to college. Everyone who knew her described a girl who was going places, a girl who was excited about her future, a girl who had everything ahead of her. And on April 28, 2014, all of that was taken away from her because of a Facebook fight that had nothing to do with her in the first place. The argument started between two 14-year-old girls over a boy they both liked at school. One of those girls was Lynn Reynolds, who was Endia's best friend. The other girl has never been named publicly because she was tried as a juvenile. What started as a conflict between these two girls did not stay between them for very long. It moved to Facebook, and once it was on Facebook, it grew. Comments were posted. Messages were sent back and forth. Other people started watching and reacting and picking sides. The kind of thing that might have stayed small if it had been handled face-to-face became something much bigger because it was playing out online where everyone could see it. Both girls were under pressure now. They had an audience. And when you have an audience watching an argument, the last thing you want to do is look like you are backing down. So they agreed to meet and fight. A street fight in front of a house in the back of the Yards neighborhood of Chicago. That was the plan. Two girls settling it in person with a crowd of people watching. Messy and dangerous, yes, but the kind of thing that has happened between teenagers for generations. The kind of thing that could have ended with some bruises and a lot of hard feelings and everyone going home. That is not what happened. Lanakia's uncle was a man named Donnell Flora. Donnell Flora had been in a wheelchair since 2010, the year he got shot. He knew better than most people what a gun could do to a person, because he was living with the consequences of it every single day. When he found out his niece was going to a street fight, he did not try to stop it. He did not call her parents or try to talk anyone out of it. Instead, he grabbed a handgun, got on a bus, and rode to the location of the fight. He said later that he brought the gun to protect his niece. He said he handed it to her and told her to pass it along to her adult cousin, Vandetta Redwood, so that the gun would not be in a child's hands. He said he never wanted anyone to get shot. But that is not how it played out, because by the time Donnell Flora arrived, there were around 24 people gathered outside that house. 24 people who had all shown up to watch this fight, who were standing around waiting to see what was going to happen. The 14-year-old shooter was standing there in front of all of them, with a loaded gun, under enormous pressure, after days of going back and forth on Facebook with someone she genuinely hated at that moment. And in that situation, with all of those eyes on her, the gun went off. One bullet grazed Lynn Reynolds on the arm. Another bullet hit Endia Martin in the back. Endia was not even the target. She was there because Lynn was her best friend, and she had come to support her, the way best friends do. When the shooting started, she ran inside the house to try and get away from it. But the bullet found her anyway, and she died from her wounds that day. A 14-year-old girl who wanted to see Paris. Dead because she showed up for her best friend on the wrong day, in the wrong place, at the wrong moment. She had nothing to do with the boy or the argument or any of it. She was just there. And that was enough. Donna Flora was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 100 years in prison. The judge made it clear that there was no excuse for what he had done. This was a man who knew exactly what guns do to people, a man whose own body was proof of it, and he still put one in a child's hands and rode a bus to a teenage street fight. The 14-year-old shooter pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and attempted murder. Because she was a juvenile, her sentence had limits that adult sentences do not have. She could not be held past her 21st birthday. Andia Martin's family never recovered from losing her. Her sister blamed herself for not being there that day. Her parents talked about a daughter who had so much life in her, so many plans, so many things she was looking forward to. All of it gone because a Facebook argument over a boy nobody even remembers escalated to the point where someone brought a gun to a fistfight. Andia Martin was 14 years old. She wanted to see Paris. She never got the chance to see anything at all. Sakina Thompson and the Instagram obsession that ended in murder. In July 2022, a 23-year-old woman named Kayla Hodgson was found dead inside her apartment in Tamarack, Florida. She had been stabbed dozens of times. The person who killed her had flown in from New York specifically to do it, and had disguised herself with a hat, a mask, and gloves. She had used fake Uber accounts to travel to and from the scene, had changed into Kayla's clothes afterwards, cleaned the apartment with Lysol wipes, disposed of her bloody clothing, and then calmly boarded a flight back to New York without calling 911. You can tell that this wasn't a crime of passion or something that happened in the heat of a moment that got out of control. This was planned. And the reason it was planned, the thing that drove a 31-year-old woman to fly across the country in disguise to murder someone she had never met in person, was Instagram. More specifically, it was the fact that Kayla Hodgson had blocked her on Instagram. And in Sakina Thompson's mind, that was something she was not willing to let go of. Kayla Hodgson was the kind of person that people describe when they want you to understand exactly what the world lost. Her family called her a fashionista, someone with a vibrant personality and a warm heart, someone who was always willing to show up for the people she loved. She was a daughter, a big sister, a niece, a cousin, and someone woven into the lives of a lot of people who cared deeply about her. She was 23 years old, and she was living her life in Tamarack, Florida. And one of the things that was part of that life was a man named Tory, whom she had started dating. Tory was someone that Sakina Thompson also had feelings for because Tory was Thompson's ex-boyfriend. And Thompson, who was living in Long Island, New York at the time, was not handling the breakup well at all. Thompson had been going through Terry's phone looking for evidence of his relationship with Kayla. She had found Kayla's Instagram page and had been stalking it, scrolling through her posts, watching her life from behind a screen, and building up a picture of the woman who was now with the man she still considered hers. The two women had exchanged tense messages with each other, the kind of messages that make it very clear that the situation had already moved beyond a simple romantic rivalry into something more loaded and more dangerous. And at some point during all of that back and forth, Kayla made a decision that was completely reasonable and completely understandable, which was to block Thompson on social media and cut off the contact entirely. She did not want the drama. She did not want to keep engaging with an ex-girlfriend who was clearly struggling to move on. She blocked her and tried to put it behind her. For most people, being blocked on social media is an annoying and hurtful experience that eventually fades. For Sakina Thompson, it was apparently the final trigger. In the weeks that followed, Thompson made cryptic posts on her own social media that, looking back, read very differently than they might have at the time. And behind the scenes, she was making a plan. She bought a flight from New York to South Florida. She put together a disguise, a wide-brimmed hat, a COVID mask, a pair of gloves, and the kind of outfit designed to make sure that surveillance cameras would capture as little of her face as possible. She set up fake Uber accounts so that her travel to and from the apartment could not be easily traced back to her real identity. She thought about this. She prepared for this. Prosecutors would later argue that she flew to Florida with one intention and one intention only, which was to find Kayla Hodgson and kill her. At around 4 or 5 in the morning on July 13, 2022, Thompson arrived at Kayla's apartment building in her disguise. Surveillance footage captured her walking toward the building. Kayla let her in, which means that in some form she knew Thompson was coming, or at least knew who she was when she appeared at her door, and she opened it anyway, perhaps thinking that whatever needed to be said could be said like adults, and that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it. Thompson confronted Kayla about her relationship with Tory, and what happened inside that apartment in the early hours of that morning ended with Kayla Hodgson being stabbed dozens of times and left to die on the floor of her own home. After she killed her, Thompson changed out of her bloody clothes and into a set of Kayla's clothes. She cleaned parts of the crime scene with Lysol wipes and paper towels, trying to wipe away whatever evidence she could. She disposed of the bloody clothing, ordered another fake Uber, and left the apartment. She did not call 911. She did not try to get help for Kayla. She just left, got on a plane, and flew back to New York. Kayla's body was found later that afternoon by someone inside the apartment. She was gone. Investigators pieced it together through flight records, cell phone data, surveillance footage from the apartment building, and items recovered at the scene. Thompson was arrested in Springfield Gardens, New York, on August 3, 2022, 3 weeks after the murder, and was extradited to Florida to face charges of first-degree murder. She testified in her own defense at trial, claiming she had only gone to Kayla's apartment to talk things through, woman to woman, and that Kayla had attacked her first, hitting her in the face and cutting her with a piece of glass from a hookah pipe. She claimed she was 2 months pregnant at the time and feared for her baby. She claimed she blacked out and woke up to find Kayla dead. She said it was self-defense. The jury deliberated for 1 hour. 1 hour to look at the disguise, the fake Uber accounts, the flight records, the cleaning of the crime scene, the changing of clothes, and all of the other evidence of a woman who had planned every detail of what she was going to do before she ever stepped foot on that plane, and to decide that none of it added up to self-defense. On October 15, 2025, Sakina Thompson was found guilty of first-degree murder. In December 2025, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing, 10 of Kayla's family members stood up and spoke. One of Kayla's cousins looked at Thompson and asked her directly what gave her the right to come to Kayla's home and do what she did. Another family member said that throughout 3 years of court proceedings, Thompson had shown no remorse. That the way she stared across that courtroom said everything. That it said, so what? Yeah, I did it, and I would do it again. Kayla's mother thanked law enforcement and said that the verdict had restored her belief in the justice system. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She blocked someone on Instagram who was making her uncomfortable, which is exactly what you are supposed to do when someone online is behaving in a way that feels threatening or obsessive. She did the right thing, and it cost her her life, because the person she blocked got on a plane, put on a disguise, and came to her front door anyway. That is what this case is really about. Not just a love triangle or a social media argument, but the terrifying reality that blocking someone online does not always keep you safe from them in the real world. Kayla did everything right, and she still did not make it home. The murder of Arie Stevens. Arie Stevens was 13 years old. He loved riding his bike, playing Xbox, eating cheeseburgers and Domino's pizza, and writing his own rap songs. He had recently shaved his head in solidarity with a younger friend who was losing their hair during leukemia treatment, which tells you everything you need to know about the kind of boy he was. He was the kind of kid who noticed when someone else was hurting and did something about it. He was kind, loyal, and hated unfairness. It was exactly that part of him, that instinct to step in when he saw something wrong, that got him killed on a Sunday afternoon in January 2021, 15 minutes after he left his front door. It started on Snapchat. Ollie came across a video that was being shared around his social circle, a video of a younger boy being humiliated by two older boys. The kind of video that gets passed around in teenage group chats all the time, filmed for laughs, shared for entertainment, with nobody stopping to think about how the kid in the video might feel about having his worst moment turned into content for other people to react to. Ollie watched it, and he did not laugh or share it for entertainment. He forwarded it to the younger boy's older brother so that someone who could actually do something about it would know what was happening. He was trying to help. He was doing what he thought was the right thing to do. The two boys who made the video eventually found out, and in their world, what Ollie had done was not kindness. It was not someone looking out for a younger kid who was being picked on. In their world, what Ollie had done was snitch. He had seen something and told someone, and that was a line that could not go uncrossed without consequences. So they went on Snapchat and they started planning those consequences. Voice notes were sent back and forth between the two boys, discussing what they were going to do to Ollie. One of them wrote in a message that he hated Ollie with a passion, and that if he saw him, he would probably end up killing him. Videos of the boys showing off knives were found on their phones later. These were not empty words from kids who were just venting online. They were building towards something real, and they were doing it out in the open on a social media platform, documented in voice notes and text messages that investigators would later recover and use to build their entire case. To get to Ollie, they needed someone he trusted, someone who knew him in real life and could get him to show up somewhere without suspecting anything was wrong. They found that person in a 14-year-old girl who knew Ollie personally, but had only ever met the two boys online. She had never seen them in person before the day of the murder. She agreed to help them. In the Snapchat voice notes, she described what was coming for Ollie as karma and said she was excited. Excited about what was being planned for a 13-year-old boy who had done nothing more than try to help someone who was being bullied. On January 3, 2021, a Sunday afternoon, Ollie told his parents he was going out to meet a friend nearby. He had no reason to be suspicious. He thought he was going to meet the girl at Bug's Bottom, a field close to his home, just the two of them. He left his front door, walked to the field, and when he got there, the two boys were waiting for him. He had walked straight into an ambush that had been planned and coordinated entirely through Snapchat. The older boy started a physical fight with Ollie. While Ollie was caught up in that fight, the younger boy pulled out a knife and stabbed him twice. A member of the public saw what was happening and rushed over. Paramedics arrived as fast as they could, but there was nothing anyone could do. Ollie Stevens died at the scene in that field, 15 minutes after leaving his home, a few minutes' walk from his front door, in the neighborhood where he had grown up. 2 hours after Ollie died, the older boy sent a text message to another teenager describing exactly what had happened and confirming his own role in it. The younger boy, who had actually used the knife, sent a message saying it was the biggest mistake of his life and that it had been done out of pure anger. Both of them were texting about a murder they had just committed, on the same phones they had used to plan it, apparently not fully understanding or not caring that every single message they had ever sent about Ollie was sitting on those devices waiting to be found. More than 90% of the evidence used against them at trial came from their mobile phones. The digital trail they had left across Snapchat was so complete that investigators were able to reconstruct the entire plan from start to finish. All three were convicted. The two boys were found guilty of murder and sentenced to a minimum of 13 and 12 years respectively, detained at His Majesty's pleasure. The girl pleaded guilty to manslaughter and perverting the course of justice after deleting data from her phone. She was initially sentenced to just over 3 years, but that was later increased to 5 years after judges agreed it was too lenient. The judge told all three of them that because of a petty online argument they had planned and carried out an attack that ended a 13-year-old boy's life. Ollie's parents, Amanda and Stuart, have spent the years since his death campaigning for tighter regulation of social media, particularly around what children are able to access and share. They have said plainly that social media played a massive part in their son's death. Stuart has spoken about how hard it still is to walk past Ollie's bedroom, how he still half expects him to knock on the door. Ollie Stevens was 13 years old. He saw a video of a kid being bullied and he tried to help. That is all he did, and it cost him everything. Steve Stevens, the Facebook killer, April 16, 2017, Easter Sunday. All across America, people were gathered with their families. Church services were ending. Meals were being prepared. Children were searching for Easter eggs in backyards. It was the kind of quiet domestic holiday that marks the passage of ordinary life in ordinary ways. And on that day, in Cleveland, Ohio, a man named Steve Stevens decided to use Facebook to do something that no one who built that platform ever imagined it could be used for. He decided to use it to announce a murder, and then commit it. Live. Stevens was a 37-year-old case manager who worked with troubled youth. By all outward appearances, he was a functioning adult with a job and a life. But underneath that surface, something had been building. A broken relationship, financial stress, a mounting sense of rage and helplessness that had nowhere to go. And on Easter Sunday, he decided it was going to go somewhere. He picked up his phone, opened Facebook, and started recording. In the video he posted, Stevens was driving. He was talking directly to the camera, to his followers, to the internet. He named a woman, someone he had been in a relationship with, and he said, on camera, that she was the reason he was about to do what he was about to do. He announced, in plain language, that he was going to kill someone. He put it out there on Facebook for anyone watching to see, and then he drove until he found his target. Robert Godwin Sr. was 74 years old. He was a grandfather. He was out for a walk on Easter Sunday, a walk he probably took regularly through the neighborhood he knew, on a day that was supposed to be peaceful. He did not know Steve Stevens. He had no connection to the broken relationship, no connection to the rage, no connection to anything that had brought Stevens to that street on that day. He was simply an old man on a walk who crossed paths with the wrong person at the worst possible moment. Stevens pulled over, got out of his car, walked up to Robert Godwin Sr., and told him to say the woman's name. When Godwin said it, Stevens shot him in the head, on camera. The whole thing was recorded, and the video, along with the announcement video, was posted to Facebook. Stevens then drove away and called a radio station, telling them what he had done, claiming he had killed multiple people. He had not. Robert Godwin Sr. was the only victim, but the claim sent law enforcement into a panic. A manhunt was immediately launched across multiple states. Alerts went out. The entire country was following the story, and those videos, the announcement, the murder, all of it, were sitting on Facebook, being watched, being shared, being spread across the platform while a killer was still out there. Here is the number that stayed with people long after this case faded from the headlines. It took 2 hours for Facebook to remove those videos after they were first reported. 2 full hours. during which the footage of Robert Godwin Sr. being murdered was circulating freely on one of the most widely used platforms in the world, during which Steve Stevens was still alive and still driving, during which law enforcement was scrambling and a family was learning that their father and grandfather had been killed on Easter Sunday while he was out for a walk. Stevens was ultimately cornered by police in Pennsylvania the following day. He took his own life rather than face arrest. Robert Godwin Sr. was dead. His family was left to grieve. And the country was left asking questions that are still being asked today. What is a social media platform's responsibility when a user announces violence before carrying it out? How fast is fast enough when it comes to removing content that documents an active murder? And what does it say about the design of these platforms that a video like that could circulate for 2 hours? Steve Stevens chose Facebook because he wanted an audience. He wanted people to watch. He wanted his anger and his pain to be witnessed by as many people as possible. The platform gave him that. And Robert Godwin Sr., who wanted nothing except a quiet walk on a spring holiday, paid the price for it. Arie Sato, murdered during a YouTube livestream. There are millions of people around the world who make their living, or who are trying to make their living, by putting themselves online, by going live on YouTube or TikTok or Twitch and sharing their personalities, their lives, their creativity with an audience. It is one of the most human things about the digital age, this desire to connect, to perform, to build a community of people who tune in because they genuinely enjoy watching you. And for the most part, that is a beautiful thing. But there is a shadow side to it that creators know about, and that most of their audiences don't fully think about. When you go online and build a following, you cannot control who is in that following. You cannot control what they feel. And sometimes what they feel is something that was never supposed to be part of the transaction. Arie Sato was 22 years old and was a content creator based in Japan. She had built an audience on YouTube, people who enjoyed her streams, who watched her regularly, who were part of a community she had worked hard to build. Like most creators, she probably knew that she had all kinds of people in her audience. But like most creators, she probably also believed that the screen provided a kind of separation between her and whoever was watching. That being online meant being, in some fundamental way, protected. That she was on one side of the camera and they were on the other, and that distance kept her safe. Kenichi Takano had been watching Arie for a long time, and the story he had constructed in his head about their relationship had almost nothing to do with reality. In his mind, they had a connection. In his mind, she owed him something. He claimed she owed him money, which was almost certainly a delusion or a pretext, a way of framing an obsession as a legitimate grievance. He had been tracking her streams, learning her patterns, building up a picture of her life from everything she shared online. Every live stream she did was data. Every time she went live, she was, without knowing it, helping him locate her. This is the specific horror of what parasocial relationships can become when they go wrong. A parasocial relationship is what happens when an audience member begins to feel a genuine, personal connection to a creator, a connection that exists only on their side, that the creator is largely or entirely unaware of. For most people, this is harmless. You feel warmly toward a YouTuber you watch regularly. You enjoy their content. You feel like you know them a little. In the same way, you might feel like you know a character on a long-running TV show. It never goes further than that. But for a small number of people, that parasocial connection becomes something consuming, something that demands to be made real. Something that turns from admiration into obsession, and then into something that nobody, not the audience member, not the creator, not the platform, saw coming. Kenichi Takano tracked down Arie Sato's location. He found her. And while she was live on YouTube, in front of her audience, doing what she always did, Being the person her viewers came to watch, he came for her. He stabbed her to death in front of her live stream. Her viewers watched it happen before anyone could do anything, before anyone could call for help fast enough, before anyone on the other side of the screen could reach through it and stop what was happening. Arie Sato was 22 years old. She was doing her job. She was doing the thing she had built a career around, and a man who had been watching her from behind a screen decided that watching wasn't enough anymore. Kenichi Takano was convicted of her murder. This case sent shockwaves through the creator community worldwide, because every creator watching the story, on some level, already knew that this was a risk. There are entire communities online dedicated to following content creators in obsessive and sometimes threatening ways. Creators receive messages that cross lines. They deal with stalkers who find their addresses, who show up at events, who make their online life feel unsafe in ways they often don't talk about publicly, because they don't want to scare away their audience or invite more attention. But Arie Sato's case made it impossible to look away from. It happened on camera. It happened in front of people who were watching and could do nothing. And it happened to a 22-year-old woman who had done everything right, who had built a real career, who was doing a live stream, who was simply present online in the way that millions of creators are every single day. There was no warning. There was no moment where she could have known it was coming. The Finley couple murdered during a YouTube live stream. In June of 2025, in Las Vegas, Nevada, two people were doing what they loved. Rodney and Tanisha Finley, known online as Finny the Legend, and Bubbly were live on YouTube. They were a couple who had built their audience together, who shared their lives on camera, who had a real community of people that tuned in to spend time with them. You know the kind of channel we're talking about. The kind where you feel like you know the people, where the comments are full of regular viewers who feel like regulars at a favorite restaurant, where the creators and their audience have built something that feels genuinely warm and real. That night their audience was watching. Their chat was active. And then, without warning, everything changed. A man walked in. His name was Manny Ruiz. He was 41 years old, was also a YouTuber, and had a history with the Finleys that their audience knew about, because it had been playing out online for everyone to see. The feud between Manny Ruiz and the Finleys was the kind of rivalry that exists in a lot of online communities. Two creators who occupy the same space, who have overlapping audiences, who have crossed paths in ways that created friction. Accusations had been made. Response videos had been filmed. Comment sections had been battlegrounds. Their followers had been watching it develop, choosing sides, adding to the energy of it with every share and every reaction. On the surface, it looked like the kind of creator beef that burns hot for a while and then eventually cools off when everyone gets tired of it. It looked like drama, like content almost, like something that existed for the entertainment of an online audience. But it was not content. It was not drama for entertainment. It was a real feud between real people. And for Manny Ruiz, it had reached a point where he had decided it needed to end. Not in a video, not in a comment section, in person. He walked into the Finley's space while they were live on YouTube and opened fire. He shot Rodney and Tanisha Finley to death, in front of their audience, on their channel. The platform they had built their life on, the place where they had met their community and grown their following and shared their relationship with the world, became the place where their lives ended. Their viewers watched it happen in real time, with no ability to do anything except stare at their screens and try to process what they were seeing. The footage spread immediately, because it was already live and hundreds of people had already seen it. In the age of social media, something that happens during a stream is already being clipped and shared before the stream even ends. The comments on the footage were full of people wondering whether it was staged, whether it was some kind of stunt, whether it was a bit that had gone too far. It was none of those things. Two people were dead, and the world was watching on their phones. Manny Ruiz was arrested. He faces murder charges. But what this case does to you, what it should do to you, is force you to confront something that the creator economy has been quietly aware of for years, and that this case put in the brightest possible spotlight. When you are a creator, you are building a public life. Your address, your routine, your appearance, your relationships, these things become visible over time to people you have never met and never screened. And when you have a feud with someone in that world, that feud doesn't stay in the comment section. It follows you into the real world, where the rules are different and the consequences are permanent. Rodney and Tanisha Finley were not naive people. They knew how online feuds worked. They were experienced creators. But there is no preparation for someone walking through the door with a gun. There is no comment section strategy that stops a bullet. And for all the visibility that being live gave them, for all the hundreds of people watching their stream that night, none of it protected them. Their audience was powerless. Their community was powerless. And Manny Ruiz knew exactly when they'd be live and exactly where they'd be. Their deaths were not just a tragedy for their family and their community. They were a warning, loud and unmissable, about what YouTube feuds can become when nobody steps back, nobody de-escalates, and nobody decides that winning online is simply not worth what it might ultimately cost. Rodney and Tanisha Finley should still be live right now. They should still be making content, still building their community, still being Finny the Legend and bubbly for the audience that loved them. But they are not. And Manny Ruiz is the reason why. And now we come to the final case. The case that sits at the very top of this list. The case that, when you hear the full details, when you understand the layers of manipulation, the planning, the audacity, the sheer calculated evil of what one person did, will make every other case on this list feel like a warm-up. We are talking about Janelle Potter, and the double murder she engineered using Facebook, a fake CIA agent, and her own father. Janelle Potter and the Facebook conspiracy that ended in a double execution, Mountain City, Tennessee. January 31st, 2012. It is early in the morning. A couple named Billy Payne and Billie Jean Hayworth are in their home. They are young. They have a 7-month-old son named Tyler. Their whole life is in front of them. The messy, exhausting, joyful early days of being new parents in a small mountain community where everybody knows everybody. It is the kind of life that, from the outside, looks exactly like what it is. Ordinary, humble, real. Marvin Potter comes to their door. He is the father of a young woman named Janelle Potter, and he has been told, by a source he trusts completely, that Billy and Billie Jean are dangerous, that they have been threatening his daughter, that they are connected to criminal activity, and that they are a threat that needs to be dealt with. Marvin Potter is a father who would do anything to protect his child. And that morning, he acted on that belief. He entered the home and shot Billy Payne and Billie Jean Hayworth in the head, execution style, both of them dead. Their 7-month-old baby boy, Tyler, was found alive, placed in his dead mother's arms. The killer arranged him that way deliberately. A child too young to understand what had happened, left in the arms of a woman who would never hold him again. When investigators began piecing together what had led to this double murder in a quiet Tennessee community, they found something they had never encountered before. Not a drug deal gone wrong. Not a dispute over land or money or infidelity. What they found was a social media manipulation so elaborate, so patient, so deliberately constructed that even experienced detectives had to stop and process what they were looking at. At the center of everything was Janelle Potter, and she had been very, very busy on Facebook. Janelle was in her late 20s, older than you might expect, given the nature of what she did. She lived with her parents, Marvin and Barbara Potter. and was described by those who knew the family as deeply dependent on them, socially isolated, and intensely resentful of people she felt had wronged her. She had developed a feud with Billy Payne and Billie Jean Hayworth over the kind of social drama that happens constantly in small, tight-knit communities. Accusations, falling outs, rumors, the usual currency of conflict among people who are too close to each other and can't avoid each other. Most people in that situation stew for a while and eventually move on. Janelle Potter did not move on. Instead, she built something. She created a fake online persona, a man who claimed to be a CIA agent named Chris. This fictional CIA agent began sending messages to Janelle's parents, and particularly to her father Marvin. The messages told a story. They described Billy and Billie Jean as dangerous individuals with criminal connections. They warned that Janelle was being threatened. They used the language and the authority of a government intelligence officer to make the danger sound official, real, and serious. They built a picture of Janelle as a victim who was in genuine danger from people who were connected to something dark. Now, think about what it takes to construct this. To build a fake online persona, complete with a believable identity, a believable background, and enough detail to convince a protective father that the government was involved in a situation affecting his daughter. To sustain that persona over time, sending regular messages, building a consistent narrative, making sure every new detail reinforced the story that had already been established. To calibrate the emotional tone of those messages, enough urgency to keep Marvin engaged, but not so alarming that he would go directly to law enforcement and accidentally unravel the whole thing. This was not impulsive. This was not the heat-of-the-moment act of someone who was furious and did something they regretted. This was methodical, calculated, patient. It took time to build, time to maintain, and it worked precisely because Janelle understood exactly which levers to pull to get the outcome she wanted. She knew her father would do anything to protect her. She knew that presenting Billy and Billie Jean as threats, not just social annoyances but actual criminal dangers, would make him feel that protecting her required action. She constructed the entire reality and then handed her father a role in it without ever telling him what the play actually was. Marvin Potter believed every word of it. He believed his daughter was in danger. He believed the CIA agent who had been contacting him, and he believed that the people he drove to that house on the morning of January 31st, 2012, were threats that needed to be eliminated. He didn't know he was the instrument of his own daughter's revenge. He thought he was protecting his family, and that belief, sincere, loving, catastrophically misled, led him to shoot 2 people in the head and leave a 7-month-old baby without parents. When investigators traced the fake CIA agent's accounts back to Janelle, the whole constructed reality collapsed. The messages, the timeline, the digital fingerprints, all of it pointed back to her. Janelle Potter had built a lie so elaborate that it had convinced her own father to commit murder, and she had done it entirely through social media. Facebook had been the tool she used to deliver the lie. It had been the medium through which she had fed her father the false information, over and over, until he was primed to act on it. Marvin Potter was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and received 2 life sentences. Barbara Potter, Janelle's mother, who investigators concluded had knowledge of and involvement in the scheme, was also convicted and received a life sentence. Janelle herself was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. An entire family destroyed. 2 innocent people dead. A baby who grew up without his parents. And a small Tennessee community permanently marked by what happened there. This case sits at number 1, not because the violence was the most graphic, it wasn't. It sits at number 1 because of the level of premeditated, deliberate, sustained manipulation that made it possible. Every other case on this list involved people acting on real emotions, rage, jealousy, obsession, pride, that got out of control. Janelle Potter's case involved a plan. A long-term, multi-platform, psychologically sophisticated plan to use social media to construct a false reality and then weaponize her father's love for her to destroy two people she had a grudge against. There is no other documented case of social media-facilitated violence that matches this level of calculation. And that is why, of everything we have covered today, this is the one that stays with you. Because it wasn't a moment of madness. It wasn't an impulse that couldn't be controlled. It was a choice, made deliberately over time, using tools that were designed to help people connect, twisted into something that destroyed lives with cold, patient precision.